sitter, you occasionally encounter some pretty interesting scenarios. In this video, I'm going to share a few of mine, as well as the take-home lesson that each of them taught me. Before I begin, I pet sit for a variety of sources. So I am a cat sitter on the Meowtel app. I have a profile on Rover, which is more geared toward dog sitting. And then I also go through word of mouth for neighbors and friends. So the stories I'm going to share are taken from a variety of sources. They're not specific to any one platform. Also, I just want to say that I'm super fortunate in it's going on, it's more than 10 years of pet sitting collectively, that I haven't had anything truly awful happen. So for example, no animals have died on me. Thank God. That doesn't mean, however, I don't have some good stories. So sit back, relax, and prepare to be entertained. So one day I got an inquiry asking if I would be okay taking care of a 110-pound American bulldog, is how it was described to me. I absolutely am not scared of pets or dogs. I grew up with dogs. My parents have always had one big dog and one little dog kind of as a team. The big dog has always been like a lab or a golden, and the little dog is a Westie. And so my exposure to that, and just generally don't have a fear, so I told them I'm totally fine with it. And we arranged a time for me to come over to their house and meet them and their dog. Typically in pet sitting, this is called the meet and greet, and it's essentially where you get to learn more about the job, see the layout of the house, meet the animal, and just kind of put a face to a name and make sure that everybody is comfortable with the scenario. Side note, but I would always do a meet and greet with a new client because there are just so many things that when you're shown in person just make it so much easier to complete a job well. So at the agreed upon time, I show up at their house and I ring the doorbell. And the very first thing I hear is a dog start barking. And when I say barking, I mean aggressive barking. I don't mean like, oh, someone's at the door, like calling attention to it. I mean mean, it really kind of stood out, whoa, and all of a sudden this enormous dog comes charging toward the door, grilling, baring its teeth, and I was just a little bit taken back by that. And I hear the female owner, is screaming the dog's name in the background and kind of chasing it. So I'm kind of standing on the porch okay. And the dog comes up so the front door had been open, but the secondary door was shut. So the dog runs up to that and it's glaring at me and barking and really aggressive posture. I'm kind of taking a step back huh? And she's screaming the dog's name and trying to pull its collar, but he breaks free from her grip and pushes through the door and comes at me and literally knocks me to the ground, no joke. And it happened very quickly. This happened so quick I didn't have time to think about it till after the fact. So she is immediately on the dog trying to pull it off of me. The dog is heavy and I am stunned, honestly, and she's pulling it enough where it can't really attack me. I don't know if it would have, but she's got enough of a weight on it to get it off, and she's screaming. And then her husband, who I think had been in the basement but had not heard most of this, came running out and kept trying to help her grab the dog off of me. And they were eventually able to pry the dog off and get it away and put it in another room. And they're both sitting there going, oh my God, I'm so sorry. She never does that to anybody. And are you okay? And I was physically okay. So they were able to thwart off whatever, physical attack could have happened. And so they basically just kept reiterating over and over, we've never seen that. She never does that. And I'm sitting there thinking privately, oh, good. So at that point, the dog is put away in the back, cannot get to me. And so we go in the house and they keep apologizing and reiterating that she's not aggressive, that was just they've never seen that. And they say it many times, and I'm sitting there not wanting to admit that it actually scared me. And my first thought is okay, if this is how the dog acts when you are here, what is it going to do when you are not here? And they're trying to convince me and calm. And we basically agree that day that what would be a good idea is if I arrange a time to come back in a few days and let's try this over again to see if the same reaction happens. And I actually ask if I can bring somebody with me because I'm that kind of shaken up. So it's interesting because later that night, I actually got a call from her and she tells me that she'd been talking to her husband about this because he had not heard the initial commotion. He did not realize they had rung the doorbell. Well, apparently ringing the doorbell is a trigger for this dog. He knew that because he worked from home. She did not really know that because she doesn't work from home. And so they had not really communicated about that aspect before, and she had not known to tell me that. So when I came over and rang the doorbell, that is, according to her, what set that reaction off. Now, I mean, it was nice to hear, but I was still not sure. So, I ended up going back for the second meet and greet and obviously did not touch the doorbell and nothing happened. You know, the dog was friendly. But I was admittedly timid, like kind of shaking. And so I think dogs and animals can sense that. So I kind of hung back and things were good. I agree to keep the job, but I swear to God, for like the 2 weeks leading up to when I was going to go over there by myself, I literally felt like I was living on borrowed time. Not kidding when I tell you that multiple friends and family members were told, this is the day I'm going over, this is about the time, I'm bringing my phone, if you don't hear from me by this time, call, like, here's the address. Like, I had my bases covered. And probably the amount of fear leading up to this that I had is a little bit ridiculous and probably means it might have been smart to back out from that one. But I was, like, determined to see this through. Also, on a side note, I think some of my fear was based on the fact that I've had a previous experience with a very, very, very aggressive cat. It was my cat. It was a very traumatic and awful story. I did make a video about it, and if you want to watch that, I will put a link. But through that experience, I learned what, roughly a 13-pound cat was capable of. And so now I'm thinking this is a 100-pound dog, 110-pound dog. I could actually be killed. So my mind is just going crazy. So the day of the job arrives and I go over to the house and yes, I was timid. I'm not gonna lie. Everything ended up being okay. And since that time, I have watched this dog multiple times and we are buddies. And honestly, I think she'd probably attack anybody who tried to mess with me. So there is no more concern. But boy, did I learn a lesson from that one. And that is just simply, before you ever go over for a meet and greet, which again, I think is something you should do for every job, ask, are there any triggers or things I need to be aware of before I arrive? For example, the doorbell. I wish I had done that. I wish I had known to do that, but you can best believe on all future jobs, that is something that I definitely do. So, I got a call, like a panicked call from somebody who was leaving not just town, but the country. And last minute, the pet sitter they had arranged fell through. So they were scrambling, and I was more than happy to step in and take the job. This job was for 2 cats. I went over to meet them and get the keys. And when I go over, she informs me that the only responsibility that I will have while watching these cats is to go over daily and scoop the litter. I don't need to worry about feeding them, I don't need to worry about their water dishes, and I don't really even need to worry about interacting with them, although that would be nice, because her best friend, is how it was described, is going to be staying at the home while she's gone. And immediately inside I'm like, okay. I mean, I don't say this, but I'm thinking, okay, so he's going to be taking care of all of that, but... And she's like, well, he just doesn't like touching litter. So, like, he's willing to feed them, he's willing to change the water, he's just not a litter guy. Okay. I'm thinking that sounds a little bit weird, but I mean, she's gonna pay me my full rate, so who am I to judge? I'm fine with it. I just thought it was a little odd. She tells me that he may or may not be there when I arrive, and don't worry, just come in with the key she gave me. Don't need to let him know. Ignore him. He knows that I will be coming in and out, etc. And again, I kind of felt a little uncomfortable about that, I'm not gonna lie, just because it's not my home and just walking in feels a little unnatural, but apparently everyone's aware, so okay. So, I mean, the cats were awesome, so let's just start with that. They were sweet, very, very sweet, and I would go over and scoop the litter and interact with them. But this person who was living at her place while she was out of town literally was there every single time I arrived, was on the couch every single time I arrived, was usually just staring at the TV. The home reeked of marijuana smell. So he was clearly smoking marijuana, which personally is a smell I cannot stand, but I kept thinking, like, if that was my home, I would be kind of mad if somebody was doing that while I was gone. And the longer the job went on, the more and more trashed the house became. I mean, the dishes were piling up in the kitchen. It was just, like, honestly a pigsty. And despite the fact he had apparently said that he was going to change the food and water, I would check them, and multiple times I had to actually fill the water dish or put food because they're just, I mean, it was filthy. And so it was definitely none of my business because I'm just doing what I'm hired to do, but I couldn't help but think, I don't get it. I really don't get it. And that especially became stronger when I would go into the litter box room. They were in the master closet, I believe, the litter boxes, and the cats stopped going in the litter box. They would go all around it. There was stuff even on the bathroom floor. One had thrown up too, and he didn't lift a finger to clean any of it. So I would go over and clean all of that up and make sure it's good. And again, I'm being paid to do that, so I get it, but I also think that like if you're staying there and you're using that bathroom, it's just kind of weird to let the vomit and cat poop just kind of sit there. Again, I just did what I was asked to do, what I was hired to do. When she got back, was super thrilled. It worked out fine. The guy never really said anything to me, so it's not my business, but I just couldn't help but think how odd. And I guess the take-home lesson from this story is you just really never know what somebody's willing to pay you to do on these jobs, so just be expecting anything, prepared for anything, and, try to try to not judge. This was actually one of the first jobs I ever had, and I was so determined to make a good impression. It was for an elderly couple, and they had two cats, but one was extremely elderly and on all kinds of medications, and they really impressed upon me the importance of giving these medications with food. I mean, they didn't say it, but I kind of picked up on the urgency that if the cat doesn't get the medications, that could be, or my concern was that could be the thing that sent him over the edge. So I was definitely determined to be super responsible. They gave me a garage door opener to their home. They left town, and they had, if I remember correctly, they were going somewhere where they were going to be out of commission for like the first 24 hours as they were traveling. So the first time I go over, I use the garage door opener and it does not work. And I'm like, oh, great, it's out of batteries. So I go to the store, get a replacement battery, replace it, go back. Guess what? Still doesn't work. At this point, I'm like, uh-oh, because they had not given me a key or a code. And so I'm like, what do I do? And so at this point, I called my mom because no matter how old you get, it's still good to have a parent come to your rescue. And she comes over to the home, and we eventually realize they live on a house that backs up to a golf course, that the back sliding glass door on the back porch was actually not locked, and that was very fortunate. However, inside the house at the bottom, they had placed like a yardstick so it could not open more than like maybe 2 inches. But I could crack it open about 2 inches. And so in doing that, the cats kind of saw us and they would come to the door and they were looking. And so I see the food on the counter, which is probably like 10 feet from where I can get, and I can't get my hand in much, but I'm really, really trying to get my hand in enough to unlock the door, trying to get something to move the stick, just nothing is working. And my mom and I probably look really weird. One of my concerns was a police officer was going to like accuse us of trying to break into the house because we're literally on the back porch laying on the ground trying to do everything to get in the door, and we're on a golf course, so highly visible. But that actually never happened. What did end up happening is I finally decide, since I can open the door a crack, I'm gonna go to the store and get a can of cat food, which I can slip in through the crack and at least get them fed something. But I'm really panicking about that medicine. And so what I end up doing is concocting something. It was like I believe it was a yardstick with like a string or a shoelace attached to the end, make like a lasso, and try to get something that can go over to the kitchen counter and knock the electrolyte stuff that the cat was taking. I actually got this to me. I used like gum to stick to it. I mean, it took, I don't remember, like 2 hours. I finally was able to coax that medication over to me. Now, the entire time I'm doing this, I'm also still trying to call them, even though I knew they were out of commission, and it was no luck. Kept going to voicemail. So eventually we got this figured out where the food is through the door and I do have the medicine, and I was able to get the cats taken care of that way. When they call me back the next day, they're super, super, super apologetic and very grateful for the efforts that I went through. And it turns out that a neighbor actually had a key, so I was able to get a key from a neighbor to then complete the rest of the job just fine. But boy, let me tell you, the lesson that I learned from this one is when you are given a key, a garage door opener, a code, whatever, test it in front of the people. It does not matter if they insist that it's the right one, that they tested it before you got over, that it was just made, whatever. Test it and ask them, if this doesn't work, is there a backup? Because that was a panicked feeling. Fortunately, it turned out well, but it was definitely memorable. So pet sitting can be just an amazing part-time or even full-time job. It's a great way for animal lovers to earn a little bit of extra money while enjoying themselves. But like any job, you are occasionally going to encounter some stuff that stands out. These stories were just a few of the ones I actually have. If you want to hear more, let me know below. If you yourself are a pet sitter, I would love to hear about your experiences. So comment below with those too. In the meantime, guys, thank you for tuning in. I will see you in the next video.